Hello world, Krista here with Books and Jams, and I'm back! Yay! It's been a while. Here I am in my new dwelling place. I have found a home in Virginia to live in. I'm renting an actual house, which is amazing. It's not an apartment. I can vacuum early in the morning. I can hammer things into the walls late at night and not worry about bothering my neighbors. It's kind of a bizarre thing. My next order of business is to really nail down the job situation. I'm still working on that. I just wanted to get back on BookTube. It has been way too long. I have a list of videos that need to be made, including my giveaway winner and Q&A from reaching 1,000 subscribers, which happened earlier this summer. I'm very excited about that. So that will be coming your way very shortly, along with all the things I've been reading in September and the rest of my plans for the rest of the month, now that it's almost halfway through the month. But let me start today by sharing with you the 4 things that I read in August. 4 books for some people is a great reading month, but for me it's really small. But I'm impressed that I got even 4 things read in all of the busyness that was happening and my focus needing to be on other things. Let's just get right into it. At the very beginning of the month, I read a book that was my July BookTuber Recommends pick from my jar of BookTuber Recommends that I've been doing all year. I picked out of that jar in July An Invisible Thread by Laura Schroff and Alex Tresniowski. I loved this nonfiction book. I flew through it, which is shocking to me because typically nonfiction takes me longer to read. But this was a story of a woman, a businesswoman in New York, who meets this 11-year-old panhandler on the streets of New York City. She kind of walks past him one day and then stops and goes back and invites him to lunch at McDonald's, buys him whatever he wants to eat. And that is the beginning of a relationship between these 2 unlikely friends. What I appreciated about this story is that their relationship is not sugar-coated. It's not all roses and rainbows from the moment that they meet. It was very realistic about how trust developed between these 2 and how she slowly began to get to know Maurice and his life and why he's on the street panhandling at 11, and how her friends were kind of hesitant and wary of the relationship that was building, and yet their persistence in the way that their lives just began to connect was really quite beautiful. It challenged me to look beyond the circumstances or outward appearance of the people that I meet or come across. I admittedly cried multiple times during the reading of this story. Their relationship ends up lasting years and years and years, and their lives have been knit together. And this is just the story of how that happened, and I loved it. Next, I read a book on my e-reader. What? That does not happen, but I read The Letter by Catherine Hughes. I enjoyed it immensely and flew through it in just a couple days. Before I get into telling you what it's about, I will just give a trigger warning. There is some abuse in this book. Just beware of that. But it's a story of Tina, who is in a very volatile marriage. Her husband abuses her in multiple ways. She works at a thrift store and is saving her money to have a way to become independent of him. One day, while going through some clothes that were donated, she finds a letter that was unopened, and curiosity gets the better of her, and she discovers that this letter was not sent and it was written in 1939. So she begins this quest to discover who these people are. And so then we throughout the book jump back and forth between these time zones of Tina and her marriage and the horrible situation that she's in. And we also meet Billy and Christina. Billy is the writer of the letter, and we begin to learn of their love story and the trials that they face as well. So this is a beautiful story. It is not fancy writing or anything like that. It was very simple but touching. I really enjoyed it very much. So there's that. Then I had 2 physical books that I read as well. One of them was a buddy read that I did with Derby Lane Reading, and we read Olive Kittredge. I actually finished it, and I don't know if she's finished it yet because she started doing the reading quest. This is written by Elizabeth Strout, and this is basically a book of short stories. So all of these stories take place in Crosby, Maine, and throughout the book we see all of these different characters in the town, and throughout almost every single story, Olive plays a part. It's really almost a depressing book. It just focuses on some of the negative parts of life. So there's one person who's contemplating suicide. There are other marriage issues that are discussed, affairs that are discussed, all of these problems of all of the people in this small town. So throughout all of this, Olive plays a very big role. She shows up in the different situations. She was a school teacher in the town for many, many years, and so people who live there have known her. She knew them when they were kids and has grown up as an instrumental part of this town. And she is a very crotchety old lady, kind of cranky, very cold and angry oftentimes, but also has a deep love for her son that she doesn't always express in the best ways. She herself experiences some trauma, explains some of why she acts the way she does. I didn't know how to feel about this book. On the one hand, I thought it was beautifully written and incredible the way Elizabeth Strout weaves these lives together, and the picture that we get of these people's lives was so clear and very realistic in a lot of ways, but it wasn't a happy book at all. It was kind of depressing and somewhat confusing. I don't know what else to say about it. I loved reading this with Derby. We had some same opinions about it and some differences along the way. I'm glad that I read it, but it wasn't very happy overall. The final book that I squeezed in by the end of August was my Goodreads read-along pick for the month of August, and that was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So this is a book that has been very popular on BookTube, and I've heard about it over and over, and for many people it's their favorite book, or one of their favorite books, or one of their favorite classics. So of course I had to get on the train and read Rebecca, and I was so glad to read it with many of you in the Goodreads group. I ended up loving this book by the end, but I had a really, really hard time getting into it. Actually, I shouldn't say that I loved it. I liked it by the end. This is the story of an unnamed narrator, a girl who gets married to Maxim de Winter and moves to his home called Manderley. Before she gets there, she learns that he is a widow. His wife, Rebecca, has recently passed away and left a very strong presence in the home. It's almost like the narrator has to deal with this ghost of Rebecca. Not a literal ghost, it's not a paranormal book in any way, but the ghost of her presence is still very much alive and an active part of her experience of moving to Manderley. The narrator to me was so annoying, very naive and very insecure. She constantly compares herself to Rebecca, constantly wonders and has these diatribes of what everyone else is possibly thinking, even though she doesn't really know what they're thinking, and that got really old for me and slowed down the pacing of the book. But towards the end, things start to pick up, some action happens, some surprises happen, some things that weren't quite as surprising, but also were a really good twist and turn. I really did like the ending of this book. I did give it 4 stars because I thought the writing was beautiful. Daphne du Maurier has this way of like circling around with her writing, whether it's in one paragraph or within the whole book, it kind of circles back to the beginning again. I just thought that was really cool. Among other things, I just thought that the writing on this was really beautiful. The setting was so clear. Du Maurier does a really good job of putting me in the story and really feeling and smelling and seeing and hearing all the sights. The setting was written so beautifully. The story itself, the pacing of it was much too slow for me, which is why I docked off a star. But I did give it 4 stars. It's not my favorite book of all time, but I am very glad that I finished it. So there are these 2 and the other 2. I read 4 books in August. I have a lot more videos to be making in the next few days. I would love to just hear from you. It's been so long. Thank you for those of you who reached out and who've said that you missed me. I've missed you too. And I am going to be playing around with backgrounds. This part of the shelf is not finished yet. And I have a 3rd bedroom. So I have a library in my house, which is amazing. So I'm going to be setting that up and finishing that. So you will be seeing some different backgrounds from me. I'm just glad to be back. So comment down below. Tell me anything. What you're up to, what you're reading. If you've read any of these books, if you thought any of the same things I did, I would love to hear from you. I'll be chatting with you soon. Bye.